Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zoom interview. I'm here with Stevie Baker-Watson, and we are going to be talking about what DePauw has gone through over this past summer in dealing with COVID-19 and what we are going to look like in the future for fall sports and for spring sports as well. Thank you, Stevie, for joining me here.
Thanks for inviting me, Taylor.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And so just for the first question, so what was it like being or just dealing with COVID or being at the head front of kind of just figuring out what you're going to do with COVID and what DePauw is going to be dealing with here?
I think the best way to describe it is just absolutely overwhelming. Not something that you can't achieve and not something that you can't work with, but the amount of information that is flowing at me, that's flowing at campus, that's flowing at our coaches is just tremendous. And I think a lot of times when we're learning about something new, we have a set of facts that once we learn, we can apply those facts. And what we've seen related to the coronavirus is that things have changed. So things that we knew back in March no longer apply. Every day I'm getting updates from whether it's from the CDC or it's the mainstream media or it's the Indiana State Department of Health. We're constantly just trying to stay up to speed. It's also really maddening and saddening as well, being at the forefront of it. When we had to depopulate campus in March and subsequently then canceled the remainder of the spring season for our student athletes, that was devastating for me as an administrator who wants to see all of our student athletes and our coaches be able to compete. And so I can't even begin to fathom how deep those emotions ran for those folks who had it within reach, who had it within their grasp, and then to have it just be ripped out of their hands at that moment in time. So, but I will say too, it's also been super engaging and fun is not the right word, but mentally stimulating is. I have a background in athletic training and exercise science, and I spent 4 years on the NCAA's Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects Committee, and I do campus wellness. So this is my space where, I am stimulated. I just wish we would have picked something that was going to be a little bit shorter in length and wasn't going to be so broadly applied to so many things that we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. What was the most difficult part, you would say, in terms of going through the entire process and like getting the campus prepared for the students coming back?
I'm a planner by nature. Right. Every other year I get to help orchestrate the Mona Bell game with the end result of having this phenomenal experience for our student athletes and phenomenal experience for our fans. But it's a known entity. And like I mentioned, things were changing on a daily basis. So we might have had a plan in place of what we wanted to do on July 1. And then stuff changed related to athletics the second week in July. And then we thought we had another plan going, and then stuff changed again in athletics, and then stuff changed at DePauw, and then stuff kind of pivoted a little bit at DePauw again. It was constantly a moving target. So we just had to be nimble and, respond the best that we could in order to protect the health of the community. So for students who moved on campus and they got to see what we were doing, we had members all across campus that were there doing health screens on them. We knew that was important to us. But we really didn't actualize and put that on paper until about 7 days in advance, like just before we had to email all the students to say, this is how you're going to come back to campus and this is what you're going to do. So that was probably the most challenging part of it, is that I can tell you something right now, and I bet you within a couple of days, it may not even be the same again. And so I was constantly worried about whether or not, I could barely keep up, let alone folks who were like just sort of tracking on this and what it was going to look like. So that was probably the hardest thing. But I will tell you, being in athletics has helped with that whole concept of resiliency and adaptability and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And sometimes you just got to fly by the seat of your pants and do the best job that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It always seemed like just every single week, just me being as a student athlete as well, it's like we would know one thing and then just like 1 week later, everything changes. And that's what it was like.
Yeah, I was so nervous. I have to tell you, every time I would get ready, I would always, give a heads up to our head coaches that here's information we need to communicate to our student athletes. And we're going to communicate it, and then we're going to follow up with a Zoom. So if they want to answer questions, they can. I was so nervous every time I hit send on those emails, because I was like, as soon as I hit send, something's going to happen. And then I'm going to get on a call and I'm going to have to change what I told them. It was, it was maddening all summer in terms of that. And I can only imagine from a student perspective, right? Hoping that, you're going to hear good news, but honestly, probably not knowing until you get on the call, like exactly what's going to be said.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we can plan for one thing that from just based off the information we get that 1 week, but then 1 week later, that entire thing that we were just like told is just like, it's gone now, just like forget about it, and something else has changed. It was a crazy summer of just like going from this weekend and week out, just like the new information that we had like 2 weeks prior was then completely different 2 weeks later. It was insane.
Yes. And I can only imagine. I mean, I think that's one of those skills that we learn, right, as we gain our life skills, is like this ability to pivot and adapt. And we had a significant number of first-year student athletes that lost a lot of firsts in their, or I should say a lot of final firsts in their high school career, right? Like their graduation looked different, their prom looked different. And then to just have this uncertainty as they came back to school, like it must have been maddening for them.
Oh, for sure. All right, now next question. What will like the rules be for like when the Lilly Center opens up for all the different teams that need to like start training or at least are going to be practicing during the fall? Like what's going to be the plan to like socially distance in the weight room or using the basketball courts or even at practice as well?
Absolutely. So I think there's two concepts to talk about. One is general campus recreation. The other one is organized athletics. So on the athletic side of things, and I apologize, you're working from home in the middle of a crisis, right?
That's what happens. It's what happens. It's all right.
I know. I just need to chill out just a little bit for me there. So if I start on the intercollegiate athletic side of things, coaches have been working since probably, I would say, late April to early May to figure out what it's going to look like when they return back to sport. And we've used the principles put out by the NCAA Sports Science Institute to figure out what that's going to look like. And big picture, we're going to be phasing students back in. So student athletes right now are sort of in this 2 week period, at least a 2 week period, where they're getting medical clearance from our sports medicine staff. They're also meeting with our compliance folks. They're going to meet with our athletic training staff, so that way they understand how to function in the athletic training room in a safe kind of way. And then we hope what they're doing is actually some conditioning on their own. So we know that from just a general body perspective, they probably need at least 7 to 10 days to get back into shape. And I don't know what it's been like for them this summer. So we need them to do that. The second phase of that, they'll begin working in smaller groups. They'll begin working with coaches in organized fashion for practices. And then after about a 2 week period there, then we will turn and probably hopefully it'll look more like a regular practice type of thing. We'll still ultimately be bound by whatever the campus has said in terms of group sizes, for instance. And so while we hope we can get to a place where we might be able to get at least half the size of an offensive, half the size of a football team, like the offensive unit on the field at the same time, time will only tell if we're going to be able to do that. So the coaches are working through plans, very specific plans about what they'll be doing with student athletes at that. On the recreation side of things, Sandra Pickett has been leading that charge, along with Tracy Menzel in the pool, and then Corey Stoffrigan out at the indoor tennis and track center to see what that's going to look like. And I think students will see some key things happening. So one is that hours are going to look a little bit funky to them, because what we need to do is accommodate for times when students can come in and use the facilities, and then we have time to clean. So you might see something where the fitness center will be open for 2 hours, and then it might be closed for an hour. We purchased some special cleaning units. They're kind of Ghostbustery like, with a backpack that we'll be able to use on all the equipment to help make sure that we get into all of the different nooks and crannies. But that's going to take some time for our students to work through in that space. And Sandra's actually beginning to work with students this week and next week to begin to train them on what that's going to look like. Students are also going to see that we're going to reduce the number of people who are going to be allowed in the facility at any one time. That space is really large. We're super fortunate in the square footage that we have, but we need to make sure that people are distanced appropriately in those spaces. So what you'll see is some equipment going offline, for instance, and others remaining online, so that way we can naturally break things up for them. And then third, what you're going to probably see is you're going to see a reservation system. So in order to help control the number of students in the facility at any one time, is that students will actually have to reserve a time to go in there. And we'll probably see something whereas if they can't routinely make the time that they've reserved, then what we'll do is we won't allow them to reserve as much time in the future to give space for other students. We know that's probably not going to work with teams. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll talk with coaches and find out if there's opportunities for them to just have that space open just for their teams to be able to do their workouts in a specific kind of way. So those are probably the big three things that you're going to see, whether you're in Welch Fitness Center, you're in the pool, or you're in Neal Fieldhouse trying to get a workout in.
All right, that's great. Now, do you see spring sports happening at DePauw? I know we're a really long ways away from that, but do you, just like speculating or just maybe about how the trend is going right now, do you see spring sports possibly happening? And if you do you see it working with maybe fall sports playing in the spring as well? Or do you think we'll have like enough resources and enough facilities to be able to house or to be able to have all the athletics at the same time?
So our philosophy is that we're going to plan until we're told we shouldn't plan anymore. So we are planning on providing opportunities for our spring sports student athletes. The date of when that's going to start, that's probably what's most up in the air for us. We've done some information, or we've given some information to the NCAA about winter championships. So we have to sort of work through that first. And we hope we're going to know about winter championships sometime during the month of October. After that, then, my sense is that the NCAA will send out another survey to institutions and conferences to get an idea about what they're looking for the springtime. And in my view, like, we really need to probably tell those students about that before they leave for fall term or before the winter holidays, so that way they can plan appropriately. Because I don't think any of us want to do what we just did about a month ago or a month and a half ago, where it was like, you're coming, you're not coming, you're coming, okay, maybe you're not, sort of thing. Like, I think students need some predictability in that. And I think families need it as well. So I am hopeful that we'll be able to do that. We have talked extensively about this with what I'll call our athletic team support team. So our sports information, athletic communication staff, our athletic training staff, our event management staff, and we are all committed to doing everything that we can to ensure that all of our students have an opportunity to compete in the spring. Even if that means we are competing every day of the week, we will do what we need to do in order to make that happen and prioritize our resources in order to do that. Now, one of the things we may see as an outcome of all of this, and this was probably the first change that the fall sport team started to see, was that we will probably begin to see changes in terms of maximum number of contests and minimum number of contests from an NCAA perspective. And if that happens, what we'll then see is probably a corresponding change in the North Coast schedule, because ultimately DePauw is going to work with their North Coast partners to determine what those next steps are. So if I go back to fall sports, what we saw is that the NCAA came out and lowered the minimums for sports sponsorship. And then what we saw was a corresponding change in the conference schedule to ensure that you could play conference opponents and meet your minimums, because there was a higher level of confidence with your conference members that y'all were playing by the same rules when it came to virus mitigation type of thing. I think you'll see the same thing apply to both winter and spring sports in that place. And then probably the biggest thing for me, if I think about baseball and softball in particular, is how quickly are we going to move to try and reschedule games? That is something in the springtime that we are just super used to. And it's really easy to think, can we get a bus? Can we get kids out of class? Like, what can we do in that space? And I'm not sure we're going to be able to pivot that fast in order to make this happen. So we'll play it by ear, but I know our full staff is committed to ensuring that our student athletes can compete if given the opportunity to do so.
All right, thank you very much. Just now, one last question. Now, there are some college sports going on right now with some of the Power 5 conferences are about to start football season in about a week. I know the ACC and Big 12, they're starting football next week. And some smaller college football teams have already started playing. Now, from just your perspective, do you see them being able to finish the season without too many coronavirus outbreaks, or do you think they won't get through the season?
I think it's going to be really hard for them to get through the season. I think what we have seen thus far is that, so one of the constants that we have heard from the very beginning is that this virus is very contagious. And that just, again, spending 15 minutes with somebody within 6 feet gives you enough exposure in order to potentially become infected. I just think they're going to have a really hard time in ensuring that everybody who's on the field at any moment in time is without the virus. I mean, I think about in football, I think about the down linemen, for goodness sakes, like huffing and puffing just because of the physical exertion in that space. I was listening to some talk radio this morning, and there was a football coach on that was talking about all the different types of masking that they've tried with the football helmets, whether it's been full clear face guards or cloth face masks. They can't find anything that actually works. It either fogs up or it's super uncomfortable for them. Like, I just don't know how they're going to be able to do it unless they move to something, they move to no down linemen. I don't know. Will they change the game of football and they're just going to, basically go 7v7? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to be really hard because the first major outbreak that you have, there's going to be a lot of people who are highly opinionated about what's going on. And one of the problems I think with this that I think would help is if they actually showed some transparency in those leagues. What I'm reading is that nobody in the Power Five is going to be disclosing their weekly testing results to folks. They already think that each other don't follow the rules. So why would you gamble on somebody's health, on a student athlete's health in that moment in time? So, I wish them the best of luck, because if they do it, then they create a roadmap for the rest of us. And it might be a roadmap that it's really hard for us to follow financially or with equipment or anything else, but they'll show us what to do. But they can't even practice against each other right now without shutting down. Like, I think Maryland just shut down again today. Like, if they can't do that amongst themselves when there's not actually, a win or loss on the line, how are they going to do that against somebody else? So best of luck to all my friends in those leagues. Like, I want to see it happen, but not at the expense of a student athlete getting sick, not at the expense of, extensive number of student athletes or coaches being quarantined. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, I agree too. I think it's just going to be, we hope that they succeed, but it's just going to be, I even think it's going to, maybe we will be happy if we get like a month of playing, I'd say, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully it goes well, but it will be really difficult indeed. But thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to help me out and help produce content